In the year 2525, if man is still alive. In the year 2525 was playing in 1969. I was a 13-year-old kid in Stamford, Connecticut, watching this team that I had watched since 1962 in the Polo Grounds, contending for the pennant. The pennant of the National League. It was unbelievable. A young team run by a wonderful man by the name of Gil Hodges, and 46 years ago, to me it sounds like yesterday, the Mets are in the World Series again, and I have on a dear friend who has been on with me a number of times, and many people love this man, love his family, love his father, Gil Hodges Jr. Gil, how are you?
Good, Tony. How are you?
Fine, thank you. And of course you know what I'm going to ask you. How's Joan?
Joan is fabulous, God bless her. She's going to be 90 years old and she's still driving us crazy.
Holy cow. I mean, that's unbelievable. And, we always, of course, a lot of us on Facebook forgot her birthday, and we all feel like schnooks, but hopefully we made it up to her.
Absolutely. And I passed that on, so thank you so much.
It's really something. And you have a great story of how your father met your mother that I'd like for you to share.
Well, I'll tell you something. It's kind of funny because my mom followed the Dodgers very closely when she was a young lady. She actually knew more about baseball than most men, especially back at that time.
Mm-hmm.
But she was introduced to him on a blind date. They had set up a blind date with my mom and my dad, and my mom was already seeing someone, but she knew who he was, so she thought it would be interesting to get to meet one of the Brooklyn Dodgers. And they went out on the blind date, and I guess the rest is history.
It's absolutely unbelievable. And your dad, we all have various memories. I'm a little bit young to remember the Brooklyn Dodgers, but I certainly remember the New York Mets. What I often think about is your father being a Dodger player when Jackie Robinson broke in and the whole breaking of the color barrier. Did he ever share that with you and share the relationship he might have had with Jackie?
I'll tell you something. All the stories about him. My dad was a quiet man who really kept everything, unfortunately, too much to himself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was one of the problems that may have caused, the heart attack. But he was very instrumental in getting Jackie, I don't want to say approved, but getting the ball club to respect Jackie for the ball player and the man that he was. But what really helped Jackie tremendously was my mom was very instrumental in getting Rachel to be befriended by the other wives. And that gave Jack a tremendous sense of calm, knowing that Rachel was going to be taken care of. I think those two factors helped tremendously. And I got to see that, unfortunately, the most when my dad passed away. At the funeral, Howard Cosell called me out of the church, asked me to go to this car that was parked in front of the church and get in the back seat. Sounded a little strange, but I knew Howard for years.
Sure.
I went, jumped in the back seat, and there was Jackie Robinson, hysterical crying. And he grabbed me, gave me a hug and a kiss, and said to me, Gil, next to my son's passing, this is the worst day of my life.
Unbelievable.
And that's when I knew the kind of relationship that they had. So they were pretty close.
It's really something, and it's just what can I say? Now you're a young kid here, and your father's playing for the Brooklyn Dodgers, and were players coming over the house and having dinner?
Tony, I was young, believe it or not, but to have Duke Snyder and Pee Wee Reese come to the house and sit down on the couch in the living room was just commonplace. It really didn't mean anything. It was just, two people that my father knew that, they would sit down and talk. None of this, unfortunately, I didn't realize until much later on in life, who they actually were.
Right.
So it was kind of funny.
It's really amazing. And did your dad, understanding his first managerial job was in Washington in 1963, did he want to be a manager, or was this something that kind of came to him and he considered it and said, yes, this is something I'd like to do?
Playing for the Mets was of course, a great thrill. He had physical problems with his knee. Mm-hmm. So even though at a relatively, I want to say, middle age, early 40s, he knew that his playing days were limited. He had never had any managerial experience. I believe it was the first time in the history that a manager was actually traded for with another ball player. So the opportunity came. He spoke to Mom. Of course, he needed to get, the blessings from her to make sure that going to Washington was going to be
okay. Sure.
But it was an opportunity for him to continue his career in baseball, knowing, of course, that his playing days were limited. And turned out to be a good move.
It's really something. Now, he's in Washington. Now, you guys, I guess, would go down there and live for the summer when he was managing the club?
As soon as school let out, the next day we were packed and we would drive to Washington, D.C. They gave him a beautiful suite in the Shoreham Hotel, and we spent the entire summers there. Myself, being the only boy, was very fortunate because I got to travel with him all summer long. So I would make all the road trips with the ball club. And I got to meet, that's when I got to meet, Frank Howard and Ken McMullen, other
Sure.
players that were on the Senators that came from the Dodgers, actually.
Now, Howard Cosell, in his book, and our previous guest, Evan Weiner, we were talking about Howard. Howard was like, if you were a sports fan growing up in the New York metropolitan area, maybe anywhere in the country, but certainly around New York, Howard was a large part of sports to you. So when he wrote a book, you went and you got it and you read it. And I distinctly recall that he had mentioned that he was instrumental, according to Howard, in bringing your father from Washington to New York to manage the Mets. Is there truth to that?
Wait a minute. I'm better off leaving that alone.
Okay. Fair enough, but we've got your father coming to New York and managing...
Frank Slocum. Tony, excuse me. I don't know if you've ever heard the name Frank Slocum.
I have.
He used to work for the commissioner's office. And he was my dad's best friend. And Howard may have contributed, but Frank also contributed greatly in making that work with my dad coming back to New York.
And that, I remember that year, 1968, and I've often wondered, and this is just me and how my crazy little mind might work, and your father during the 1968 season, he has a team that's a perpetual last place team, but he's got signs of life here. He's a real good young pitcher, Tom Seaver. He's got a great catcher, Jerry Grody, Cleon Jones. The Buddy Harrelson. We're starting to look like a ball team, and that must have been, that first year must have really been an exercise in patience for him.
You know what it was? I think it was more of a learning period, not only for him, but for the 25 guys on the team. Don't forget, this is a ball club that had always been considered somewhat of a laughing stock. Nobody actually took them too serious. A team who had lost 100 games on several occasions, were never real contenders for anything. And of course, as we now know and look back, with Tom Seaver and Jerry Kuzman and Nolan Ryan and Tommy Agee and Art Shansky and Kenny Boswell, all players who, we didn't know how good they were yet. And they just started to, it was more of a respect scenario. My dad wanted to instill in them that they were professional athletes. And every pitch, every game, every inning, 100%. And it took a little time, but nobody, after 6 months from spring training going forward, no one liked to lose. No one felt comfortable losing. It left a bad taste in your mouth. And that's what he taught them. And some of those lessons, had such a big impact on them for the rest of their lives, that they turned out to be not only great ball players, but great men also.
Yeah, for certain. And it was funny, as I was getting ready to speak with you this past Saturday, I was watching the clip of the players after 1969, winning the 1969 World Series, singing "You Gotta Have Heart" on the Ed Sullivan Show. And what amazed me was everybody looked so young, everybody was so thin, and you had this impression of your father just like bearing down on these kids to make them win. And I know that wasn't the case, but man, oh man, they must have really, I mean, the respect just goes without saying that they had for your father.
Well, I mean, excuse me, when you listen to them today, any of them, from Ron Swoboda to Art Shamsky to Tom Seaver, anybody, they all talk the same about him today as if they saw him 2 weeks ago. And it's been 40-something years since he passed, and they still have the same feeling toward him. I think those are the kind of attributes that make a person define who a person really is.
It's really something, and I can to watch baseball managers through the years. We were showing clips earlier of Billy Martin. Now Billy had his way of managing, but your father just had this way of coming out and protesting, either explaining with his hands or hands in his pocket, and he just commanded such a respect that we don't.
Tony, I can see him walking to the plate right now with that baseball that hit.
Yes.
Yes, I agree with you, Tony. He just had that way
Well,
about him.
and Cleon's going to first base, and here's Earl Weaver running out. It's just.
Earl can't believe what's going on. God bless him. What a great manager he was.
And
boy.
And when you talk about the '69 Mets, now you were there for so much of it. You were with the club. You were with your father. You had that unbelievable August and that amazing September. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. And how did your father keep these kids kind of like, keeping your mind on baseball and, making them want, I mean, what was the atmosphere like then?
He never let them get caught up. And the basic scenario was, come to the ballpark tomorrow, we need to win. It's not, what kind of week we're having or what we've done over the last 10 days. It's tomorrow's game is the game that counts. We won tonight, that's over. Tomorrow is the game, 100%. And he taught them to almost, keep everything just simple. Don't get caught up in the moment. Don't start reading the clippings. Don't start realizing what kind of baseball you're playing, because it's just, it's unbelievable the way they play. I think that had a lot to do with it.
It's really, and the teams they were facing and beating, it was like you couldn't believe it.
We're not even going to talk about Baltimore, I hope.
There's no need to. You can go and watch it. I
sat in his office before the World Series, and He said, sure. What's the matter? What's the matter? Of course. What are you doing on the field with this ball club? You see these guys? Any idea how good this team is? He got up from his desk. I can close my eyes and see it now. He got up from his desk, walked around me, and closed the door to his office and said to me, I'd like you to be quiet because there's 25 guys outside who think they can win. What? What does that mean? I had no idea what that meant until I saw them win 4 in a row. But they weren't concerned about statistics. It didn't mean anything to them.
It's amazing, and we think of today's Met team, and God bless them on a great year, really, and the fine young pitchers that they have, Matt Harvey, DeGrom,
This is as one of the great people in this game who we just lost with it's deja vu all over again.
Yes, Mr. Bear.
So yeah, this is. It's some great trades.
Well, and I was
teams from within, kids coming up.
Mm-hmm.
This is a good team. I'd like to see them do well.
It's an amazing thing because I was listening to I was driving home. I was listening to Mike Francesa, and a caller was talking about, well, this is the greatest group of Met pitchers that I've ever seen. And Francesa said, look, I beg to differ with you. Not that Mike's always that polite, of course, but he said, there's there was a time when you had Seaver, Ryan, and Kuzman, and just count up their wins and count up their complete games. And Gil, we're never going to see anything like that again. Never.
Yeah. Well, today, unfortunately, you can't afford them.
No.
It's kind of tough to get those guys on one team.
And now, as far as the pitching, they all had the same motion. They all had in different ways, but they were all drop and drive, leg driven pitchers. Now, was that your dad's design or was that Rube Walker's design?
It was a combination. My dad had the utmost respect for Rube.
Mm-hmm.
One of his closest friends, from Dodger days.
Sure.
So, and knew how he could handle them. Don't forget, these are young people. They're kids. So you needed to have someone there who could instill things into them that they would believe. Because it's hard, I don't have to tell you with kids, to tell them something and make them believe it. When I used to look and see Tom's leg pants in the 5th and 6th inning, he just filled with dirt from the mound on his kneecap. It was just amazing. I think it was something that they both agreed, but Rube really had a lot to do with instilling that in them. He worked with them a lot more. And my dad had the confidence, in Rube, the way he had the confidence in Joe Pigotano and Eddie Yost to do their parts, and making the whole puzzle fit.
It's really something, and believe it or not, as we run out of time and so many more questions to ask you, and of course we'll talk again, but I'm curious to know, 1969, you've had the ticker tape parade, the Mets have won the World Series, your dad returns home. Any differences, any changes, any differences in thought, perception, approach, or was it another winter for the Hodges family?
I thought it was going to be different until I got punished for coming in a half hour late on a Saturday night. So I'm saying that everything just about stayed the same.
It's unbelievable, and we can only speculate if your father had lived and what the teams would have been. I know he wouldn't have liked pitch counts. That much I can tell you.
I might have to agree with that one, though.
Yeah, he wouldn't he wouldn't have liked whatsoever. But Gil, again, thanks. Best to your mom, best to your sisters, and best for a Mets win. And sure, we'll be talking soon. And I really pray for the day that we're both there watching your father be admitted into the Hall of Fame, and I think it's
that'd be great. Looking forward to it. Tony, thank you again. I enjoyed it as always. All the best to you and all of yours. Stay well, my friend.
Yeah, you too. Take care, my friend. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.
And that was Gil Hodges Jr. And, oh, that brings me back just thinking about that 1969 year. Maybe the Mets of this year will give us those same memories, at least for a generation of new fans. But with that, we're winding out to go home. Home's not far from me, but home in the show sense. Tony D'Angelo here on Coast to Coast. We'll be back